Hello, everyone. This lecture provides an overview of today's lecture that is accessible in Module 1 of this course. It is focused on Shola Olorunyomi's work entitled Traditions and Afrobeat. In this work, Olorunyomi engages with the idea of how Afrobeat started and the different ways that Fela Anikulapo Kuti, who is one of the foremost African musician who engages with Afrobeat, the label Afrobeat, is several struggles with it, how is he began to use the label and at the same time discarded it, thinking that Afrobeat was used as a tool of exploitation, especially by record labels. Olorunyomi also helps us in his work to dig into the overall idea of the traditions that are associated with Afrobeat and how it began not just in West Africa, but also how it is an infusion of the jazz music, the high life music, and the various ways that African cultures, African traditions, African language, African um, equipment, musical equipment are integrated into Afrobeats. Part of the ideas that he shared started with the phases of naming Afrobeat, especially because Afrobeat did not just start as Afrobeat. What was originally very popular at that time in the early 50s, and in fact, prior to the colonial era in many African nations, there was high life, there was jazz that were not some sort of genre of music that began solely in West Africa. But there are a lot of African instruments that have been part of music, songs, lyrics, engagement with cultures, and how people embody the culture that we call African. And this is part of what sets the stage for Afrobeat. So when you think about Afrobeat, you want to also think about how Africa and African musicians insert the experiences of the people, the culture of the people, the ways of life, the religion and rituals of Africa into the music and its genre itself. And so um Olorunyomi's work also provides some understanding of how Fela Anikulapo Kuti came into the overall discourse around Afrobeat. So Fela did not initially start Afrobeat as Afrobeat. He went to London in Trinity College to study music, and he began with jazz music and high life music. And even around that time, there was high life music in places like Ghana and other regions of Africa. But those kind of music, especially when it is staged in live performances, are accessible only to the upper middle class. And so, those all other African equipments that are used in music have always existed prior to that time. But in terms of jazz music and high life music, participants of such music and the enjoyment of it and being part of that live music was restricted to a particular group of people who are classified as the upper middle class. However, by the time Fela returned back to Nigeria around the late 50s, between 1958 and 1960, he continued to do a lot of infusion of the jazz music, the different forms of African equipment, and trumpet to sing African song, not just English language, but a mixture of everything African. So think about the different kinds of languages that Fela Anikulapo knows how to speak. For example, he speaks Yoruba. He is from the southwestern part of Nigeria, precisely in Abeokuta. He also uses English fluently. He uses a lot of pidgin, and his music evolved not just as an entertainment, but it performs, a fusion of, religious rituals, socio-political kind of music that changed a lot of movement in African context, speaking truth to power within those, region and time frame when Fela Anikulapo Kuti. When you think about this whole idea of music and the kind of rhetorics around it, there is this idiom around how music generally is linked to different kinds of cultural production and appropriation of evolving registers that are found in music. And there's no way you talk about those evolving registers that you don't talk about the cultures, because the cultures inform the kind of registers that are engaged with within the music. And so there is that tendency to want to generalize Afrobeat as, something that has to follow the call and response kind of music, but it goes much more beyond that. And that leads us more to understanding the different kinds of genre that was part of Afrobeat. So when you think of high life and pop music, popular culture generally, you think about not just call and response, but the kinds of rhythm that are found in rhythm of gong, the pentatonic scale, the tonal inflected rhythm that are based on the language of the singers, and much more. And so the uniqueness of Afrobeat is traced to the historical antecedents of drum. So, in the Yoruba cosmology, and in fact, the history of how drum and its use evolved among the Yoruba people, the Anyo of Agalu, we call them the Anyo Agalu. They are this group of family that are um, connected directly with drumming and the creation of drum. And so the trees that are used for drum making are in proximity to human existence. They are usually located around places where there is human movement and interaction, because drum is meant to interact and mimic human ways of speaking, tones, and rhythm. And that is why we have different kinds of um, drums that are used not only amongst the Yoruba people, but in Africa, across different parts of Africa. But specifically to Afrobeat, we can link some of them to the worshippers of Obatala deities, the different kinds of drums. We also have other drums that are basically the talking drums, because they mimic the tone system of speech and language use and cultural expressions of the Yoruba. So when you think about Afrobeat, it's not just the beat. It is also the dance. It is the expression of culture. It is the expression of the different fusion of language and what's the language and ideas and content within that music is, coordinated to do. Many times it is part of the political structure and organization of any society, not only in Africa, but across the world. And that is why music is a very powerful tool, to create change, to establish culture, to engage with the spread and representation of the voice of a particular set of people. And Africa is at the center of it. I am going to leave the PowerPoint presentation and all the materials along with the questions that you're going to respond to on Canvas. So I believe this video gives you an overview of what this lecture is about. So please click through the modules to see the questions and ideas that you are going to be engaging with your classmate and, in fact, with the instructor of this course. Thank you for listening.